What's going on, everybody, and welcome into Hog Hoops Live Season 4, Episode 1. It's the same show with a new look and a new face. I'm your host, Curtis Wilkerson, joined this year by my co-host, my right-hand man, the vibe guru, noted birthday boy, Andrew Ellis. Arkansas basketball is back. The Hoop Hogs are looking good. We're going to talk about the Alcorn State game. We're going to preview Friday's matchup with Gardner-Webb. We're going to dive into some burning questions about this Razorback basketball team. It's a jam-packed show today. Let's get started. Andrew Ellis, my guy, man, it's good to have you on here. I'm pumped about this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's start with a vibe check, man. College basketball season is back. How are we feeling?
I'm feeling great, man. I'm so excited to be talking about real games and real things that are happening rather than just spending all summer speculating on what the rotation is going to look like, what so-and-so is going to look like. Is Caleb Battle a real person? Like all these questions that we've had to sift through all offseason. We're here now. We've made it. The journey is over. The season's here. This team has won the first of, 30, 33 games, whatever they're going to win this year. We're off to a hot start, and let's keep it rolling.
Yeah, I love it. You're right. They're off to a good start, 1-0. Let's talk about this Alcorn State game a little bit. Listen, we can talk all we want to about the, back-to-back SWAC championships, regular season, whatever. Those guys weren't very good. Okay. So Arkansas did exactly what they were supposed to do. Got a big win, 93-59. So on one hand, you look at it and you think, okay, well, I don't know. Can we really have any grand takeaways about this? Maybe nothing crazy, but I think there were definitely some notable things. What is maybe a thing or two that really stood out to you from that game on Monday?
Well, I'll tell you the moment I knew that Arkansas was going to kill Alcorn State was whenever I asked Coach Musselman on that. I guess it was Monday or Tuesday or the week before. I said, "Hey, this team they're not very big. Are you guys going to be able to rebound?" You would have thought they were playing the Monstars the way he was talking about them. They were going to be it was going to be a huge thing. So I expected Arkansas to dominate the rebounding battle, which they did fairly easily, and that was a huge reason. I thought it was a business-like game. I figured Arkansas wouldn't slip on the banana peel that early in that situation, and took care of business. Wasn't the most ruckus crowd in the world, but, a decent amount of people there for an opening night against Alcorn State. And, Arkansas just did what they needed to do. And we got some questions on the rotation that we've been wondering about. Jalen Graham was finally able to play. We didn't see him in the 2 exhibition games. As we saw on Monday, he's going to be a huge part of this big man rotation, regardless of how it ends up. And dare I say, got the leg up in that competition and may have made a nice little case that he might be the starting 5 for this team, or at the very least going to play a good bit of minutes. And we still got some stuff to sort out on the wing. Jeremiah Davenport, Joseph Pinion, neither of them really flashed, although Pinion had some nice plays down the stretch, but still trying to figure out who's going to get those last few rotation spots, what it's really going to look like, because we saw Eric Musselman play 13 guys in the first half on Saturday, and he was the first one to tell you that ain't happening. He ain't doing that too many times. And so I expect this rotation to just get shorter and shorter, but man, this team looks really sharp, and all the pieces that we knew were going to be there are there. And the shooting really stuck out to me too. I mean, you make 12 attempts, which Arkansas didn't make 12 in a game all year last year. I think they only made 10 once. And the attempts, they attempted 30. They only attempted more than 22 once last year, and that was against LSU when they went 4 of 25. So I think we see right away that the shooting has not only been addressed, might even be an asset for this team. And I think you saw right away that the attempts, it's just a completely different offensive game plan for Arkansas. And so I'm really excited to see what they got.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with your first point there on the rebounding. But I thought it was interesting because I feel like the last couple of years, man, I've looked at these Razorback teams and I'm like, why are they not more aggressive on the offensive glass? I don't understand. They're so athletic. You'd figure they'd be all over that. And so to hear Muss talk about how he wanted to start charting that, how aggressive they were, like, when they attack the offensive glass, when they don't, I thought that was all great. So for them to go out, 14 offensive rebounds is a good number, I think, in any game, but, especially in a game where you shoot a really high clip, there's not that many misses. You rebound over half of your misses. I think that's a really good percentage there for them. The 3-point shooting too, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's almost weird to watch an Arkansas team knock down a bunch of threes. I don't know how to feel about it. I was almost conditioned over the last couple of years to watching a 3-pointer go up, and I kind of cringe. Like Tremont Mark, for example, not the prettiest shot in the world. Obviously, he's knocking it down, but every time he'd pull up, I'm like, what are you doing, man? But then he makes it. So I'm like retraining my brain to understand what it's like to cover a basketball team that can occasionally make a 3-pointer. But no, I think you're right, man. It's good to see him knock down a dozen of them. If you're going to have 30 attempts, that's a lot. They saw a lot of zone defense in that game, but they also had 37 free throw attempts or whatever. So a pretty good balance there. You make a dozen threes and 10 of them come from guys other than Jeremiah Davenport or Joseph Pinion. I think that's probably a pretty good sign as well. Let's talk about a couple of these guys. I already mentioned Tremont Mark, so let's get into that. I mean, Andrew, we knew that he was going to be, a defensive menace, a guy who's long and athletic, can probably slash to the rim. We're seeing some, point guard Tremont Mark. We're seeing 3-point sniper Tremont Mark. I mean, what do you think about what you've seen from him so far?
Well, it's crazy. I mean, if you had told me when Arkansas first picked up Tremont Mark that he was going to hit 4 threes and have 3 assists, 1 turnover, like he was going to do those kinds of things and be a lead ball handler, like you mentioned, I probably wouldn't have believed you. The things I love about Tremont Mark are like his defense, his leadership. He's been on a ton of winning teams. And so that DNA is going to be there all season. You know that when the games get tougher, you can lean on a guy like that. But to see him kind of filling in some of these gaps that Arkansas needs, like the shooting and like the playmaking and the distributing, seems like, you might not want Tremont Mark to be your point guard for 40 minutes, but I don't think he's going to have to be. I think between, him, like guys like him and Ellis, Devo Davis, there's enough of a playmaking presence there. And, you mentioned that he knocked down 4 threes. That's what's funny about this is I think some fans probably watch the game and they think, oh, well, Tremont Mark went 4 for 6 for 3. I think Caleb Battle hit 3. Like, are they going to hit 7 threes every game? Maybe not. But again, you mentioned Joseph Pinion only hit 1. Davenport only hit 1. Devo hits 1. Ellis hits 1. So it's like, I see a lot of very sustainable trends here. It's not like Tremont Mark's going to hit 4 threes every game, but I think that I wouldn't be stunned if Ellis has his fair share of games where he hits 3 or 4. Devo Davis, we've seen him light it up, hit 3 or 4 in a game before. So I think Tremont Mark is just one of the guys that you just know what you're getting out of him. And we saw in the Purdue game when the game got tight, they kind of like that matchup. That's something they can exploit, is having him as a lead ball handler, as like kind of a big point guard. And we've seen the Musselman have a lot of success with guys who fit that mold, kind of like a Jalen Tate or Anthony Black, those bigger, longer point guards. And like I said, Tremont Mark's not going to be your everyday point guard, but I like having that in your back pocket of like when the game gets tight, we have the matchup we like, depending on what the lineup looks like. We can just attack teams with this. And so I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think, the other day we got to see Caleb Battle and Tremont Mark lead the way like we have a lot. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if you start seeing guys like Devo take a little bit of a step forward. Trevin Brazile is someone they're going to go to more and more. I mean, he's doing so well, and we're not even seeing the full Trevin experience. So I agree, man. I'm all in on just the makeup of this team. And, Tremont Mark's an interesting one because when we first started going to practice and looking at the red-white game, it's not like he was lighting it up out there, but I think you could see the quiet confidence with someone like that, just kind of like a silent killer, like we mentioned before. And you could tell when the lights get on, he's right at home. And when the game's on the line, he wants the ball in his hands, and just the perfect kind of guy to add to a team that kind of needs a little bit of that dog and that leadership there.
I know it just popped off the screen there, but I feel like we need to address that birthday shout out from one Hillary Frank. I mean,
I really like that Hillary Frank woman. I'm interested. I want to
know
all
right,
about her.
That's awesome, man. Hey, listen, Trevin Brazile, it's almost uncanny. It's crazy just to see some of the things he's doing right now. An ACL tear, it's not easy to come back from. And for him to be just as explosive, and dynamic as he's been early on, I think that says a lot about, the approach that they took. I mean, the rehab, the treatment from the medical staff, they really had a plan. They went out and executed. Eric Musselman was talking about, maybe going back to some of his NBA connections and seeing how they handle those things. And you look at Brazile now, and I think it's fair to say that he's shaking off the rust. He's looking more and more comfortable every time we see him out there, more and more confident. He's not afraid to take some hits or jump or test that thing out. And man, he might be in line for a really, really impressive season. Did get ejected in game 1. Okay. So if anybody had that on their bingo card, there you go. But listen, man, this guy's knocking down threes. Love it. But those dunks, man, to set the tone. I mean, how good did that feel, right? To see Trevin Brazile come out there. I mean, he's played a little bit in these exhibitions, but your first official game back, to just rip through and go hammer it on somebody to open up the scoring for Arkansas for the season. He had the poster a little bit later on. Just feels like he's primed to have a really, really special year.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of our bold predictions early on. We did a little piece on HawgSports.com. Everyone should go check that out, where we did some bold predictions and kind of how we see this thing playing out. And I don't know if Arkansas is going to have a situation where they just feed Trevin Brazil constantly, and he racks up these games where he's averaging 24 and 12, just because there's so many other playmakers on this team and guys that can score for you. So I think statistically, he might really end up in that kind of 15 to 17, maybe 18 range. But I think, the efficiency that he showed the other night, I mean, those 3-point shots are going to be there all year. I mean, all year for him, anytime, any matchup. Only missed one shot from the field, and I think it was from a three. So it's like the efficiency that he puts up, he gets some blocks in there, and, he has his big scoring games. There's going to be some matchups where they just really are able to exploit whoever is guarding him. I feel like he's just a walking mismatch. But, going back to your injury point of the plan that they had, all offseason, we've been kind of tracking it. We thought he would be back, and that was the plan. But I feel like a lot of us were a little bit more anxious than we needed to be. We're all kind of like, hey, is he gonna be there? I wanted to see him in the red-white game. You're kind of waiting, but it was very clear. And credit to the staff for just being, right there on it the whole time. I mean, they've had some injuries pop up this offseason. You wrote about this yesterday. I mean, they look pretty good. They've handled it all. They've overcome it. Mekhi Mitchell's back in there. Jalen Graham's back in there. Trevin, like you mentioned, I mean, every game you can see it's like almost like 5%. He's just like amping up. He's amping up. And it's been really fun to see. And, man, I think he's going to have some special nights down the stretch. And just a little peek behind the curtain for everyone. I texted Curtis during the game on Monday, because we sit 3 rows apart. That's a separate conversation that we can have. But I texted him. I was like, hey, Trevin just went back to the locker room. Like, he wasn't like limping or anything. But, like, he had a coach with him. Like, I don't know. And we were trying to figure out what was going on. And then starts kind of, generating some buzz around the media table. And everybody's like, oh, I guess he got ejected. Nobody really let us know of that. But we were kind of confused. But I was like, man, Trevin just went back to the locker room. Like, I don't know. Is that a bad deal? But apparently he got ejected, which, what a way to set the tone for the season right there.
Right. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that they didn't announce it in the stadium. There was that hard foul, the kid clothesline Caleb Battle there, and we're all just kind of waiting on that review. I thought he might get ejected. He got the flagrant one. But yeah, you mentioned that about Brazil, and we're kind of all looking around like, what the heck is going on here? It wasn't until my wife texted me. She was watching the game. She's like, I can't believe TB just got ejected. I was like, well, what did he do? And it turns out he came off the bench, and that's an automatic. And so I guess if you're going to get ejected, he knows better than that. He knows the rule. But that's probably a good reason to do it as opposed to, getting out there and punching somebody in the face or whatever. So free pass on that. Musk gets the tech. It's a 30-point game with 5 minutes left. He's still fired up. But he kind of sets the tone for everybody, including, I think, Caleb Battle. And that's one of the last guys I want to talk about before we move on from this blowout game. But man, he just strikes me as a guy that's got a lot of swag. That New Jersey attitude about him, and he just feeds off of the energy of the crowd like nobody I've ever seen. It's really fun to watch. He's a guy that's always beating his chest after he makes a shot, engaged with the student section. He took the hard fall there late in the game. He's doing the push-ups on the floor. People love that. I'm sure opponents are going to hate him. But for him to come out, and he's battled some injuries too, right? I mean, he's broken both of his feet, I guess, over the course of the last year or two here. That sucks. That's not fun. But listen, man, he's back. 21 points in his debut. I was kind of getting it done all over the floor, and he's defending, which is something that we didn't know if he was going to do or not. What do you think about him?
Man, I'll tell you, I mentioned the confidence with Mark, but Battle's another one of those dudes where it's like you can just see it. Like if you talk to him, I'm talking about on the court, off the court. We got a chance to talk with some of these guys after a practice one time, and just the way this dude carries himself, it's like he knows. He's like, I can get a bucket on whoever. Like, I'm sitting there trying to talk to him, interview him, and he's like, I could tell he's looking at me like I can cook this guy. I can get a bucket on this guy anytime. And I think that's just kind of the way he approaches it. And, with all these transfers that are coming from different directions, like Tremont Mark is a guy that we knew he'd be pretty good. But again, new team, you kind of got to prove yourself, integrate yourself. You got Devo Davis has been there before, but all these new personalities coming together, you would think there would be a little bit of that awkward, eagerness to prove yourself and show that you're like one of those guys. But with Mark and with Battle both, that's one thing that's really impressed me is they let the game come. They're not forcing it, they're productive and they're showing they have these skill sets that are going to show up and be huge for this team in March. But it's not like they're like there's a weird rift between them where they're trying to find out who's the guy or what. They all just know what they're capable of. They're super confident and Battle, man, the defensive end is the one that when you're talking about who's going to finish games for this team, who's going to start games, and obviously Battle came off the bench and played a lot of minutes, which is a trend I expect to continue. But that defense is something you always have to think about, especially when you got guys like Ellis and Devo, and you see, you're like, all right, we got some guards. Like, if Battle's in there, is that an issue? But man, with the defensive intensity he's shown, I think he realizes this is his last year. It's time to win, and I think all these guys are just bought in. And locked in on one goal. And so it's really interesting. And, I'm not expecting Caleb Battle to be like picking up the lead guard for every team at 94 feet and just harassing them. But being able to do your part, hold your load, and not be a liability is just, it's about as much as you can ask for some of these dudes. And I really like what I've seen in the intensity that this dude brings. And I mean, that's for an Alcorn State game. And we saw a little bit of that against Purdue, but I'm just really looking forward to seeing these guys who clearly have that like next level type of makeup. I'm excited to see them more and more in the biggest atmospheres that we're going to see in front of these huge crowds and on these big stages against good teams.
Yeah, 100%. And I definitely want to get into some conversation about the rotation. Before we do, a couple other things that were on my mind about that game. One thing that I liked was some of the ways that Arkansas was mixing things up defensively. I feel like every time they made a free throw, we were seeing them in a different type of press, whether it was a 2-2-1 or a 1-2-1-1. They were running a lot of that kind of shadow trapping in the half court that they used to do with Justin Smith that was so effective all the time. Sometimes you've got Trevin Brazile kind of on the back end of that press, serving as your rim protector. Sometimes he was the front man using that 7-foot wingspan to disrupt some things. So, Arkansas is always going to be pretty much a straight pressure man-to-man team. But if they're going to start mixing in some full court stuff, they've got the depth to do it. We've seen them, in terms of turnovers in the exhibitions, force 20, and then in this first game, they forced 15. This team that's going to really be athletic and thrive in transition, the way that they're able to generate turnovers and get out in the open floor, I think is going to help an offense that's pretty potent. Then on the flip side of it, we've been impressed with maybe how far along Arkansas is in terms of their continuity and their efficiency offensively. They're really moving the ball. I like the way they're cutting, moving, screening. There's not a lot of standing around. But, 15 turnovers against Purdue, 15 turnovers in this game. Some of it's, still gelling, right? Maybe I pass to a guy when I think he's zigging and he's zagging instead. But maybe that's an area for them to clean up moving forward. Before we talk about the rotation, is there anything else that you need to see from these guys in terms of maybe improvement, taking the next step forward before Friday?
Well, I think the point guard battle is, and when I say battle, all these guys are going to play. So it's not even like a debate for playing time or anything like that. It's not like you're going to bench Devo or bench Ellis or any of these guys. But Arkansas has done this the last few years where it's not like they have a true point guard. Like Anthony Black played point guard a lot, but he's not a true lead ball handler like at the next level. You think about guys like Jalen Tate who are 6'6". Jimmy Witt before him was kind of a non-traditional point guard. And so Arkansas has gotten away with this before, and that's kind of a trend with Musselman is that it's more like point guard by committee and distribute by committee. But Ellis and Devo, I really liked what I saw from Devo from that perspective. You could tell he was intentionally taking a little bit of a backseat, not trying to be a lead ball handler, let these other guys settle in. I mean, Devo, we know what Devo can do, and we've seen him do this time and time again where it's like he almost goes invisible at times in the early season because he's letting everyone else figure it out. But, I think that's kind of one of my questions is like, all right, when this team needs to run sets, when they need to get into sets, when they need like a real floor general, is it okay? I mean, Ellis is a guy that averaged 4 assists at Louisville last year, but also averaged 3.5 turnovers. And so it's like they don't have a ton of guys that have that experience of just being that floor general consistently for good teams. And so, like we mentioned, Mark and Battle, who are going to take on some of that prowess, but it's like, does Arkansas have enough true playmaking point guard to get through? And I think they do, but it's just something to monitor throughout the year. And I really think that in terms of these next 3 games, the big man rotation is probably the biggest question that we've got to get figured out with this team is like, is Mekhi Mitchell, who started 31 games last year, is he your starting 5? And if he is, what does that look? I mean, he played 4 minutes the other night, didn't play a ton against Purdue. Chandler Lawson has kind of been the biggest story of the preseason. He's emerged as a huge piece at the 5 and looked awesome against Purdue. His minutes went down a little bit the other night, which a little bit surprised me. Jalen Graham worked his way back from injury and looked good. Defensively, is he going to be your starting center? Maybe he is. We've heard a lot of good things about the way he's changed his practice habits, but I think that big man rotation, just getting a little bit more clarity on what Arkansas is going to look like and which one of these guys can play with Trevin Brazile. And I think that's the biggest thing that Jalen Graham did in that game Monday is he obviously had the 8 rebounds, which I know Musselman was a huge fan of. He really liked that rebounding, had his scoring, which we've seen him pop off as a scorer before, but I thought the chemistry with him and Brazile was really good when they were on the floor on both ends, really. And I think that's a huge piece because Trevin Brazile is going to play. We can talk about who's going to be in the rotation, whatever. Trevin Brazile is going to be on the floor for about 30 minutes when he's healthy. So it's like whoever that starting 5 is or whoever that big man that's going to finish the games for them, I think they need to be able to play with Trevin Brazile. And so that's what I really liked about Graham's performance on Monday. And so I think these next 3 games before Arkansas goes to Atlantis, it's time for these big men to kind of make their last case of like, all right, I'm for sure. You can't take me out of the rotation. And we'll see if Lawson or Graham are able to do that. And we're able to see if we're going to get some signs of life from Mekhi, who's also still kind of working his way back from a foot injury. So we'll see. We're probably not seeing the best version of him that we've seen in the past. So I'm really looking forward to see which one of these big men start to flash. And hey, even freshman Bay Fall. I mean, I liked a few of the things I was seeing from him. Had a real grueling stretch there. He was getting fouled pretty hard, but I thought it was good to see him get out there and just get active and get some playing time. Because I mean, at this stage in the season, against some of these opponents that Arkansas is going to play, there's plenty of room for that. So hey, if Bay Fall's going to flash, now's the time to do it. And so I'm really interested to see kind of who emerges from that big man shuffle.
I think that might be one of the, I can't believe we actually haven't mentioned that yet, but maybe one of the biggest developments from this game is that Arkansas had all 15 guys got some, legitimate minutes, especially the scholarship guys. 12 of them scored. You need that. It's more on tape. It's more evaluation, getting your feet wet, especially guys like Bay Fall and Layden Blocker, who are obviously talented. They need the game to slow down for them a little bit, obviously. Maybe a little bit too aggressive. They played a combined 20 minutes and they both fouled out, right? But yeah, anytime you can get those guys in there and play a little bit and mix it up, they're going to be that much better every time they come out. I think we've seen it with Layden Blocker, particularly. That red-white game, I thought he looked a little bit lost out there. Maybe the lights were a little bit too bright. Took a step forward against UT Tyler. I thought he looked real good against Purdue. And hey, like he fouled out there in that game the other night against Alcorn State. But I like the way he was playing, man. He was physical. He was aggressive. So you never know what's going to happen with a team over the course of the season with injuries, which we've already seen a lot of them with this Arkansas group. You got to have everybody ready. But yeah, I'm with you, man. I think the point guard play and the big man rotation are probably the two areas that, we're going to be looking at the closest. I agree with you on point guard. I feel like Ellis is probably the guy who is doing the best job in terms of initiating offense. Seems like when he gets in trouble is when he takes his man off the dribble. He can get into the teeth of the defense in the paint whenever he wants. It's decision-making once he gets there. He leaves his feet, boom, he kicks it out to somebody who isn't there. Turnovers. So that's something that he's got to work on to clean up a little bit. But yeah, Devo can handle it in a pinch. I know that scares people because that experiment did not go well in the years past, but he's a 4-year veteran guard. He'd be fine. We know that at the end of games, Eric Musselman is gonna, do the stall ball. He's gonna ISO some guys in ball screens, battle, mark, whoever it is. They've got plenty of options there. I'm not worried about it. The big man stuff is what they've got to figure out. I thought you brought up a really great point about who plays best with Trevin Brazile. I agree. I thought it was Jalen Graham the other night. And I think Jalen Graham would have played more last season if Trevin Brazile was still there, because TB can clean up a lot of Jalen Graham's mishaps defensively because he can step over from the weak side and block a shot. And so I really like their chemistry. I think it makes Arkansas super dynamic offensively, but my mind continues to change. Throughout the preseason, I just kind of assumed that it's probably going to be Mekhi. Like, he's a returning guy. He's reliable. You know what you're going to get from him. We haven't seen anything from him over the course of the preseason. This first game, Chandler Lawson has done a really nice job. I still think he's a guy who's probably earned his way into the rotation. I don't know if that means a starting spot he's going to play. So to me, it's who's going to step up between Mekhi and Graham. I'm kind of perplexed by Mekhi. I don't know if, he missed that press conference last week because he was sick. Were there some lingering effects of that? He to only play 4 minutes and not get a look after that first rotation. He didn't look good while he was out there, but it's a little bit puzzling. Are you concerned at all about Mekhi and just what we're seeing right there at that spot?
Well, I'll just say, Jeremiah Davenport didn't hit his prop the other day, but thank God we didn't go with. My next option was Mekhi's 4.5 points, 3.5 rebounds. I thought that was free money. I was
telling everybody it was free money. I haven't even gone back and looked at that thread on the message board because I'm sure people were atting me like, "Come on, bro,
where's my free money at?" Yeah, there were a few. But concern, I don't know. The only reason is because it's not like Arkansas's in a position where it's like we gotta have Mekhi Mitchell. We gotta have him playing. Whoever it is that's going to start at the 5. Unless Graham is the one you could probably make a case that might finish the game, but it's like whoever starts. Mekhi started 31 games last year and played 12 minutes a game. So it's not like we're asking these guys to combine. And whoever it is, Chandler Lawson, Graham, Mekhi, whoever, I don't think the bar is that high. So it's like I'm not super concerned. And again, we've seen Mekhi's better than what he's shown these last couple games. We've seen him look good in times before, and so the sickness is something I kind of forgot about. That was a good point on the sickness. Again, the foot injury as well. So it's like between those two things and the fact that he's an older guy who we've seen be productive before, I'm going to give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt. But I will say, we're talking about the rotation. The other day was the first time that I started to really consider where I'm like, when they trim this sucker down, are Graham Brazile and Chandler Lawson going to be their 3 bigs that they roll with? I'm not saying they will or won't, but I think it's the first time that I really started to consider that. And I agree that I feel like Lawson has kind of made his case that, this preseason has been a big moment for him, and he's already exceeded most of our expectations. I would say I think that's fair. One thing I wanted to touch on real quick, I feel like a lot of people are really worried about the turnovers and the free throw percentage, and fair enough. You turn the ball over 15 times against Alcorn State, and you shoot 62%. I remember at one point I was writing down Ellis and Devo had only 1 turnover and 7 assists in the first 19 minutes and 20 seconds. And then Ellis made a stupid pass right before the halftime ended that kind of got him up to 2. And then he had a couple more there in the second half. But a lot of those turnovers came once the game was well in hand. And so it's I'm not excusing them, whatever. It's still an issue they got to clean up.
With lineups we're not going to see in the season.
Well, yeah, we've seen this happen so many times. I mean, all the time where it's they have a game where they turn it over 23 times. I mean, they had a game in Europe where they turned it over 27. It was an absurd number. I don't remember what the number was, but I remember being that's not real. That has to be a typo.
I remember they had 81 turnovers through those 4 games in Europe, and we were like, oh boy.
So it's if there's an area where it's you can clean up, that's probably one that they're going to be able to. I mean, Musselman will just have them carrying around bricks or whatever for a while just to get the hamstrings up or something. But and the free throw percentage, I think Bayfall, Jalen Graham, and Denijay Harris combined for 13 attempts.
Bingo.
Never going to happen again in the regular season. I feel confident telling you that's never going to happen. So I'm not necessarily panicking about the free throw because you got guys that like Battle and Pinion and Mark and all these guys who have shown they can knock down free throws when they need to. And so I feel as long as Bayfall's not going 1 for 7 from the free throw line every night, we're going to be all right in that department. But we'll see. But and Ellis, the same thing. I've seen some people kind of concerned about whether or not is he really the true point guard or whatever. And like I mentioned, he had 1 turnover through the first 19 minutes when the game was still up in the balance, so to speak. And so it's
he was great against Purdue.
Right. And so it's I think a little bit of that is it's 62-28. And so it's hey, maybe I'm going to make a stupid pass. It's I'm not excusing. We're talking about 3 turnovers here. If one of those passes doesn't go out of bounds, all of a sudden it's 2 and it's not that bad. It's I'm willing to give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt there on the turnovers, especially with Devo having 0. I really like that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do this real quick for this rotation, because you brought it up earlier and I thought it was really interesting, is that it's not like we were asking Eric Musselman how deep he was going to go, how many guys he's going to play or whatever. It seemed like every other question he was saying, listen, I'm not playing 13 guys. You need to get that through your head. So
it was killing him on the first half while he was putting all those guys out there. He was like, this sucks.
Yeah.
I hate this.
And he's not. He's 100% not. And so I thought it was interesting that he said, because it's usually 6 or 7, he said, do I go to 9? Do I go to 8? So maybe he's at least considering the fact that he's got enough talented players that can help this team to stretch it out a little bit. But let's quickly run through the guys who are the locks, and then let's go from there. And maybe we can decide where we're at right now on who are going to kind of fill the rest of those spots. So I think you've got, in my opinion, Ellis, Devo, Tremont Mark, Trevin Brazil, Caleb Battle is in there. Who else?
I'm not going to argue with you on those. Let's say, Jalen Graham, I have a hard time believing isn't going to be in the rotation. Whether or not he starts, he's going to play minutes. So it's I feel like he's one that's up there.
At 6.
Davenport.
I wonder about Davenport. I think he's going to be in there. It's either going to be him or Pinion. I think it's going to be Davenport personally. And listen, that can change from game to game, but we've talked about this before. I think what gives Davenport the edge, even though he didn't shoot it that well the other night, I actually thought he did some other things. He played good defense, and people have been talking about that. I remember one time he got burned back door, and I was getting ready to be like, boy, people are going to love seeing that. But he recovered and blocked the shot. He was active on the glass. He had a really nice assist. I can't remember who it was to. Maybe it was to Trevin for that dunk. It was either him or Graham, but it was assisted for a dunk. So I tend to agree with that. That gets you to 7. It's crazy because the entire offseason I've been like, yeah, Makai, he's a lock. He's in there.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of with you where I still think that's going to be the case ultimately. And I think they need that to be the case because he is 6'10", 240, and their most physical presence and proven rim protector. But man, how can you keep Chandler Lawson out of the rotation right now? I know he didn't play that well against Alcorn the other night, but he's just kind of that glue guy that does every single thing you ask him to do. He's long, he's versatile, and he can knock down the occasional 3. He might be ahead of Makai for me right now in the rotation.
I think he has to be at this moment, as of what we're going off what we've got, which is not a huge sample size, but I mean, I don't know how you give Chandler Lawson DNP coaches decisions at this point right now, especially just because he keeps showing you different things. So it's like we don't know what the ceiling is. This dude might just take more and more jumps, and I definitely like and the long arms. I mean, everyone talks about the long arms. Those are long arms, man. What are they? 7'7"? What is his wingspan? It's legit. It's
7'7" on a 6'8" body. That's nuts.
Yeah. Well, it's funny is like credit to me. This tells you how stupid I am. I remember just chalking it up when he committed. I was like 6'8", not going to be able to start at the 5. Like I just immediately just was like, no, it's not going to happen. I just kind of brushed him by. But man, I mean, you see him out there and he doesn't look small either. I mean, we saw him again. If there was a matchup where his 6'8" was going to be an issue, it would have been against Purdue, and it wasn't. And in fact, he was kind of an asset in that game. Really was able to stretch things out and give Purdue a look they weren't really ready for. I don't know if I'm ready to say he's like a lock for the rotation, but I think it's hard to imagine him not playing a ton. So what would that have us at 5 locks if we don't count Graham and we don't count Mackay or Lawson or Davenport? Right. So I guess you go 5 true locks.
Yeah.
Graham's probably a lock. I would go as far as to say I think Davenport's a lock. I think even if Pinion played a lot, I don't think it would take that. I mean, I think I would imagine to be both of them. I think that's the conversation of if both of them are going to play, or if it's just going to be Davenport and Pinion's shooting isn't needed because of Davenport. But I leaned over to Grant, our colleague and coworker and close friend, Grant Baker at HawgSports.com. I leaned over to him at the beginning of the game and I was like, Davenport has 2 assists before he's even put up a shot attempt. And I don't think anybody would have had that. I thought that was interesting that he came in and, like you said, did some of those extracurricular activities. And the threes are going to fall. I mean, they call him a streaky shooter, and he is that, but he's got a big sample size that this guy's going to knock down 3-pointers. I mean, he's knocked down over 200 in his career. I just have a hard time believing he's not going to play, and I really like that guy.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that, the 5 guys that I think we agree on that are like 100% absolute locks, that might be my favorite group in terms of a closing lineup, unless you're playing against like, Oscar Tshiebwe, who's not there anymore, but you get my point, like a dominant big man. But if you're able to go, Ellis, Devo, Tremont Mark, Caleb Battle, and Trevin Brazil to close out a game, that's pretty nasty. So yeah, I think we're kind of in the same spot there. I do want to, I want to ask you a yes or no question. All right. So just give me a yes or no answer, and then I have a follow-up. Okay. Andrew, is Arkansas an NCAA tournament team?
How many teams is it? 64 that they let in? 68, I guess, 68. Technically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're going to make it. I think they're going to make it.
Okay. Well, for the record, I agree. Every AP voter agrees. Every coach that votes in the coaches poll agrees. Every bracketologist agrees. Every computer that does analytics agrees. Matt Norlander at CBS Sports does not agree. Okay,
our colleague, our coworker at CBS Sports.
And I love Norlander. This hurts my soul because I love Norlander. I listen to their podcast religiously. I read all of his work. I think he does a great job. Matt Norlander has Arkansas under 20 wins, 8th in the SEC, 47th nationally, and the Arkansas Razorbacks are on his list of single-digit seeds from last year and preseason top 25 teams from this year that will not make the NCAA tournament. So, like I said, well-known, reputable analyst, knows his stuff. I followed him for a long time. He does not need the clicks from pissing off Arkansas Twitter. So I ask you, sir, what does he know that we don't? Like, what would have to happen for this Arkansas team to not go to the dance? Because I don't know where he's at with this.
To answer that first question, there would have to be a minimum 2 injuries. Like, it would have to be Trevin Brazil's, something flares up with him, and then maybe even like Battle or somebody, is just one of your main guard, like Mark or Battle. It would have to take minimum 2 injuries, I think, and they would have to be pretty severe. But I'll be honest, I'll give you my take. I like Matt Norlander. I've been reading his stuff for years. I really like what he has to say. So it's like, this isn't just like some guy who's like an idiot who just doesn't know what he's talking about. That's not what's happening here. And I'm not even going to claim that he like doesn't believe what he's saying, but here's what I think happened. He started squatting on this take over the summer, thinking, Arkansas's got these new pieces. Is Trevin Brazil really healthy? Which, by the way, that was one of his things. He kept being like, well, what if Trevin Brazil's not healthy? It's like, but he is. So it's
underachieved last year.
Right. But so I think he was, when he first started this whole bit, I think he probably truly thought he was telling the truth, where he was like, hey, I could see Arkansas being not as good. If that's what it is. But I think at this point, he's so far in. And look, Norlander, if you're listening and want to correct me, feel free to reach out to me and let me know. but I think he's too far in at this point, and he knows he can't backtrack. But
True.
he's planted some seeds of backtracking where he's
He
like,
has.
well, if Trevor Brazil's healthy and they end up all these pieces end up being good, then maybe they will. I'm like, okay. But I think
he even said after
too far into the bid, and so he's just like, he just got to roll with it.
He even said after the Purdue exhibition, I don't know if you saw his tweet or not, but he's like, "Oh, buddy, like that's I'm hearing from you Razorback fans." He said on his show, he's like, "Listen, I'm prepared to be proven wrong if this holds up." But I mean, kudos to him for at least somewhat sticking with it right now, because man, that's a take. Hey, you want to say, maybe they don't finish in the top 4 of the SEC, or maybe they're just a fringe top 25 team, fine, but to have them that low and not making the tournament, whoo, buddy, that is a hot take. Gardner-Webb on Friday. I'd ask you what you know about Gardner-Webb, but we asked Eric Musselman, and he didn't know anything at the time. It's just it was so interesting to give you guys context on what we're talking about. Monday night, Arkansas beats Alcorn State. We're at the press conference, and not 10 minutes after the game ended, we were told to go ahead and ask some questions to preview Gardner-Webb. Well, Must just finished his first game. Gardner-Webb just finished playing their first game. He doesn't know what's going on with those guys. But what I will say is, listen, this is a game that Arkansas should be able to handle. No problem, in my opinion, but it is a step up in competition from what they saw against Alcorn State. Razorbacks played them a couple years ago, beat them by 18. They've got a really good guard in DQ Nicholas, who's a first team all league guy. They're a team that's projected to potentially win their conference. We know Arkansas likes to get teams like that in for the non-con. But listen, at the end of the day, this one, just like probably the first 3 or 4 games here, is about the Razorbacks. So is there anything in particular that you're maybe that you haven't seen or that you want to see more of from this group, or just maybe what are your expectations for what we see Friday night?
Well, let me tell you where the extent of my Gardner-Webb knowledge comes from. The other day, in my story at the bottom of it, I had to write what was up next for Arkansas. And so I did a quick Google search of Gardner-Webb's mascot. I saw a picture of a bulldog, and I was like, that looks like a bulldog, so I'm going to go with Bulldogs. I was half expecting someone to comment on the story and be like, oh, they're actually the Prairie Dogs, or they're actually the what, I'm not even 100% sure that if they're not the Bulldogs, someone can correct me now. They might not.
They are the running Bulldogs in apostrophe.
I remember Gardner-Webb coming in here a couple years ago. So, I'll feel free to be proven wrong. I'm not expecting a tremendous test from Arkansas, but I am expecting that, that I think these next couple games leading up to that Greensboro game, the Greensboro game is the first one where I'm like, really like, all right, this is something we really got to lock in and watch. And that's that one, that rotation might shorten up real quick against Greensboro. So I think between now and then, it's kind of the things I talked about earlier, like these big men, this is your chance. Like, I mentioned Bayfall earlier. Bayfall, if you are going to have any chance to be a rotational big and potentially like factor into this conversation, it kind of has to happen right about now. Like you got to start making that push right about now. And so that's what this game is kind of an opportunity for. And I think, between now and Atlantis, that's the key, is like those guys we mentioned that are the rotation locks. Those are the locks. Everyone outside of that group, like, this is your time to shine. Like Pinion, we've seen Pinion light it up in non-conference, and we've seen him play huge minutes for Arkansas against Missouri in SEC play last year. Like, he's one that pretty much every time we saw him in the preseason, he looked unreal. And so it's like, I feel like he's due for one of those type of like knocks down 4 threes, and it's like, oh wow, you kind of see the impact. So I'm just that's kind of what I'm going into this game looking for, is like, which one of those guys from that group is going to make their case? Which one are we writing the so-and-so flashes after the game? That's who I really want to see, is like, who emerges from that group. And hey, if it's Chandler Lawson, great. If it's Mekhi Mitchell and he comes back and he has like 7 and 7, great. All these guys I think are capable. And so I just think it's kind of time for the cream to rise to the top. And that's what some of these games are about. And, I'm sure the game it won't be as bad as the Alcorn State game. It definitely won't be. But I'm sure there'll be a time straight later on in the game where they maybe mix in some other rotations, and maybe even they play all 13 scholarship guys. But I think it's just kind of time for that group of non-locks. And Jeremiah Davenport, whoever it may be. By the way, everyone listening, don't be on the wrong side of the history with Jeremiah Davenport. Went 1 for 6 opening night. Like, he'll be all right. He's gonna be all right.
I'm gonna go ahead and call my shot right now. He's gonna hit at least 3 threes against Gardner-Webb Friday.
And if he doesn't, you can hold Curtis Wilkerson financially responsible for whatever prop bet you placed.
I'm already financially responsible. I feel like, for the Mekhi Mitchell thing. I was standing all over that. What was our best bet? What did we go with for the prediction story? Do you remember?
It was Jeremiah Davenport. So, okay.
It was Davenport.
Let's talk about this. Beth Saracen completely just thought no one would notice except us, because we happen to do this. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning that Monday to check to see, and they had Jeremiah Davenport over 1.5 threes and over 4.5 points. I think they went and changed it because they realized if he hits one, he's going to hit the other, and like they're kind of counterproductive.
Yes.
And it was like plus 155. Then I checked later, and it's over 1.5 threes, over 2.5 rebounds. It was like plus 400. I actually like that bet better, and
Right.
I would have had no problem rolling with that. And if it had hit, I would have taken credit and acted like, I mean, that's what they had. He got the rebounds easy and didn't get the threes, which was the layup. I thought he'd for sure get that one, but that was what we went with. Keep an eye out for that, everyone. Every game we're going to have at the very least one. We might start doing it more if Saracen posts the lines earlier, but we're going to post kind of our favorite of those double R prop bets that you see on Twitter, everyone tweeting out about Bet Saracen. They got some really good stuff there, and it's always intriguing, and they love taking our money. And I mean, they love it.
Yeah, 100%. I love that we're doing that. It's a lot of fun. Andrew, I want to throw one more thing at you here, and then we'll do some rapid fire through some of these comments because we have a lot. It's National Signing Day or National Signing Week for the early period. Jalen Shelley, the 4-star wing right up the road in Branson at Link Academy. He signed his letter of intent today with Arkansas. Isaiah Elohim, another 4-star top 50 guy, a former top 5 prospect in the country before he dealt with some injuries. He's supposed to sign and make it official tomorrow. I think that's it for the 2024 class. The high school kids, at least for the Razorbacks, unless they're really operating behind the scenes on something right now, I don't think we're going to see another addition there. And so I was posting yesterday on the message board about these guys signing and all that. And somebody said, hey, it's, who do you have your eyes on in the transfer portal? It's never too early to start speculating. It's funny because, and we talked about this on a different stream the other night, but there's always, a guy who Arkansas winds up signing that they played, earlier in the season or whatever. But I want to ask you this, because as I look at this roster, unless Trevin Brazil doesn't go pro, which I'm pretty sure we think that is going to happen.
About a year and a half late on that, but I think
exactly. The only big man that's scheduled to return next season is Bay Fall, who's, hey, a lot of talent, developing a project. We'll see where he's at this time next year. I think he'll be a much better version of himself, but I don't know that Arkansas necessarily has the listen, Muss is like the importer, right? I mean, he's the transfer portal guru, but they don't necessarily kill it all the time in there with big men. They have no choice this year. Like they're going to have to go into the portal in the offseason and find a starting center and at least one other guy who can really help him with that position. Does that scare you? Because I think it might scare me a little bit, if I'm being honest.
Scare me? I don't know. Because I agree that the high school class is probably done.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen this this game play out before, where we're starting to do the math in our heads of like how many scholarships are left, who they gonna sign, do all this. These things work itself out. Like it's so far away. I feel like we got to just let this thing play out. And I said this the other night on the stream with neighbors, but I'll say it now. If anyone really thinks like, hey, you want to start scouting and getting to know who are like the recruiting side, you want to know who are, just start turning on college basketball. Yeah. I mean, you can start with Arkansas's games because they've set the precedent. They have no problem recruiting a guy that they play against. I mean, Jalen Tate, Justin Smith, Stanley Amude, like they've done that before. Yeah. They have no problem, keeping a note when someone good comes. Yeah. So it's like if you come in, if you see someone good come into Bud Walton Arena, you might see him again next year. I don't know, who knows? But I really think like you just kind of got to let it play out. And we saw Arkansas dabble with some of those big fish transfer big men like a Grant Nelson or like a Hunter Dickinson, allegedly. So it's like we kind of saw that they were in that game. I'm not saying they're going to get someone of that caliber, but I think that like guys like that are kind of, I don't want to say it, but like always available in March or April whenever you need. And so it's like we will at some point, I mean, we'll start seeing the list pop out of this transfer is heard from 9 schools. Arkansas is one of them. This transfer is heard from 7 schools. Nice. Arkansas is one of them. So it's like, this coaching staff, I don't put anything past them. Like if there's a task to be accomplished, they're going to figure out a way, whether it looks the way that we want it to, or maybe it includes some head scratchers. I mean, hey, when they picked up Chandler Lawson, I was kind of like, well, nice, I guess, but it's like, whatever.
Yeah, okay.
And so it's like, I kind of just trust this staff to go out there and identify the pieces they need. And I think the big, they definitely are going to have questions to answer up front. I mean, they have questions to answer up front right now. So, I mean, we'll see if they figure that out. But I think one thing we've also learned is if Muss has a team that like suffers in one area, he usually wants to, it's like last year, the 3-point shooting was killing him. So obviously he goes out and gets some shooters. Last year he had a team full of freshmen. So he's like, hey, let me just get a bunch of older guys here. Like, I think that we're going to see something like that play out, where like that might be the number one priority. They might have a transfer big man committed on like April 3rd as soon as the Final Four is over. Who knows?
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Okay. We're getting a little bit tight here. We got Sam Pittman's press conference coming up, but I do want to roll through some of these comments because that's more important. So let's do a little bit of rapid fire.
Sam Pittman's press conference. I agree.
You see what I did there? Okay. Honcho Razorback. Beeler, we know who you are, brother. Thanks for tuning in. You are the hype man for the Razor's Edge message board. We appreciate you. Wanted to make sure that we gave you a shout out here.
But Zachary, I want to say his real name. Zachary, I'm going to say your name in real life now. I just want to let you know, so many people, my girlfriend knows your name. Curtis knows your name. I know. I talk about you in the most glowing regards on such a rate. I want you to know that. And I'm being dead serious. Like, huge fan. I really appreciate everything you bring to our board. You're the man. You're the man, Honcho Razorback. We love you.
Yeah, 100%. And since we're talking about people that we appreciate on the board,
big time.
Cody James, hey, big time addition to the basketball stuff. What is this all about? Can you answer for yourself here? For those who are listening to this in podcast form later, Cody James says, Andrew better not mention an early tournament exit again. What are you talking about? Are you calling an upset already?
Listen, I was very clear in how I worded the story of our bold predictions where I said this. I didn't say Arkansas was going to get upset in the first round or the second round or whatever. All I said was, if you look at Muss's tournament run, they have not lost to anyone that they weren't supposed to lose to, which if anyone has watched the NCAA tournament or is familiar with it at all, you know that that's kind of the name of the game. That's pretty much how this whole thing works, is you lose to people you're not supposed to. No matter how long, you don't play this game long enough and at the level that Arkansas is playing it at without losing to someone you're not supposed to lose to. Will it happen this year? I don't know. Will it happen next year? I don't know. But it's like, I just think it's one of those things where it's like, it would be kind of crazy if all these teams the last few years that have had so many obvious flaws, so many clear deficiencies where it's like, oh, someone could, they seem so susceptible, and they've survived their share of close calls, but it seems like this year's team doesn't really have those deficiencies. So it would be kind of funny, not good, but it would be kind of funny if like this was the year where it's like Colgate gets them, Vermont comes back for revenge or something like that. Listen, in all seriousness, when I look at this team, I don't see a ton of those like areas where I'm like, oh man, I hope they don't face this in the tournament. We just saw them face the best big man in the damn country, and he was awesome. Right. So it's and they performed well. They didn't shut him down, but it's like that wasn't a matchup that ate him alive. So it's like I don't see any of those matchups where I'm like, oh, I hope they don't face a team that does this. I think they're going to be fine, but I just was kind of calling to attention the fact that they could be potentially due for one of those, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Love it. Okay. Dalton Adams, I like this a lot. Layden Blocker is a copycat of Devo on the defensive side of the ball. I agree with that. That's kind of the way Devo got onto the floor as a freshman. So when I look at Layden Blocker, I think there's two different pathways that he can take, right? He can take the Devo Davis pathway, or he can take the KK Robinson pathway, right? As a freshman. That's just where I'm at with it.
Choose your adventure.
Yeah, it's literally a fork in the road, okay? Because everybody wanted it for KK, but he just couldn't seem to figure it out. He was a walking foul when he got his opportunities. Layden, you fouled out in 10 minutes, brother, okay? So you're already heading off in the wrong direction.
He's already shown us both. He's already shown us the Purdue game and the Alcorn State game.
Exactly. We need that consistency, man. But no, seriously, I do. I love Layden Blocker's energy, his intensity on the defensive end of the floor. Like, he is in dudes' shorts like crazy with the ball pressure, diving on loose balls. He's just so explosive with everything that he does. He's doing all those things right now that Devo did when he was a true freshman, and he wasn't getting a lot of playing time, but eventually it got to a point where it was like, we've got to have this dude on the floor because his energy makes plays and it changes the dynamic of the team. That's the mindset that Layden's got to have, and I think he's definitely talented enough to make an impact.
I want to add one quick thing on Layden there. Layden's a guy that, similar to Devo going into his freshman year, where like all summer, it really wasn't a thing where I was like trying to figure out where's he, I just, it's not that I was overlooking or underestimating the kid. It's just kind of like, I look at these other pieces and I kind of know what they bring to the table. So my mind naturally gravitates to them and sees that. But I think the defense is the number one case. Like if you're Leighton Blocker, I think, and he knows that, and you can tell he knows that by the way he's been playing defense, where like that's his case. Because you talk about all these closing fives that are like Ellis, Caleb Battle, Jeremiah Davenport, or whoever, and it's kind of like, there's a little bit. You might need a defender in there or whatever. And, Devo was kind of, as a freshman, it was kind of undeniable. And it was going into that year, none of us were talking about, like, is Devo going to, handle the point? Is he going to come? Nobody was talking about that. We were all talking about KK. We were all talking about Moses Moody and whoever. But it's like, and so I'm not saying Leighton's going to do that. But if he's going to do that, I like some of these signs that I've seen early from him. And he looks bigger out there than I thought he would. I don't know what his listed height and weight is, but like when I saw him out there against Purdue, I just really like the way that he fit in from a physicality and just you could tell he looked like a dude out there. And so I'm really tentatively pretty optimistic on what I've been seeing from Leighton Blocker for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, another birthday shout out here. This is from my man Kingsley. I don't know how familiar you are with Kingsley from Twitter and everywhere else, but this dude is a regular on Hog Hoops Live. He's one of our favorites. He's always got comments popping in on the YouTube feed. Kingsley is the man. We appreciate him. He gives you a happy birthday shout out.
Appreciate that, Kingsley. Yeah, you're the man. I love seeing you. When I see his name pop up, I'm like, all right, we got the lads in here now. We got the group in here.
I think this is fair. Andrew Bell asks if Andrew Ellis has the best hair in the SEC. People are asking. Let me just say again, some people are going to be listening to this in podcast form later, and that's awesome. We appreciate that. Hop on there and get the content. But if you're not tuned in to the live stream or checking it out on YouTube, you're missing out because this man has got some excellent flow right now, and it's worth your time to take a few minutes just to look at him, just to stare it down.
Well, Trey's picture that he has for me on HawgSports Live is like from me, like April 2021 or something like that. So it's like I look like a child compared. So I think when people see me on these streams, they're like, he doesn't look anything like I thought he would. But also, full disclosure, Andrew Bell is my college roommate and one of my best buddies. He texted me before the show and was like, "Can I have permission to comment?" I was like, "Go for it." I just was hoping he didn't say anything crazy. As much as I would like to just pretend like this wonderful compliment came out of nowhere, that's my guy. So I'll go ahead and I'll do the noble thing.
I appreciate your honesty there, but he's right. People are asking for the record.
He's asking. So yeah, we're good.
Okay. Cody James. I like this when he says, I can't decide if Caleb or Trevin's going to lead this team in scoring. I keep going back and forth in my mind. Which is interesting because you've got a Ford, and probably a guy who's going to be coming off the bench for you. And I think they're both great options in terms of who could lead this team in scoring. Do you lean towards one of those guys or are you taking the field?
Do you want me to tell you the correct answer or not?
Tell me the correct answer. Inquiring minds want to know.
The correct answer is Trevin. And here's why. But look, Caleb is going to have, he's currently, as of right now, the leading scorer of the Razorbacks. So it's like, he's fully capable. He only played like 20 minutes the other night. Like he's going to have some monster games, where it's like
I was going to say that Caleb might have the single game high this season. Like he might be the dude who goes off for 35 one night.
100%. The reason I lean Trevin is one, because Trevin is going to have some of those. We saw him in Europe have that game where he had like 28 and 12 and he only missed one shot. Like he's going to have some matchups where just like teams don't have any answer for him. And there's going to be a lot of teams that don't have an answer for Caleb Battle. But I just mean like from a size physicality standpoint, like I think Trevin's ceiling is, or I would say his floor is very high, because I feel like if Trevin just goes out there and exists, he's going to have like 9 points a game off of just being 6'10" and finishing some dunks, hitting a corner three every now and then. So it's like I feel like he's not going to have any games where it's like 3-point. I don't imagine him having any of those games that drag him down where it's like, I'm not saying Caleb will, but I'm saying like I could at least see a path where it's like, hey, the rotation works out a weird way, or maybe we like this matchup better where like Caleb struggles to hit a three or something like that. Trevin, I feel like I don't see any path to where like, if Trevin were to play 30 minutes and only score 6 points, like what would have to happen? Like he would have to just miss every open layup he gets, every dunk, like every three. Like I think a lot would have to go wrong for Trevin Brazil to not have. And so I think he's going to have a lot of those games where it's just like easy 12 points on 5 of 7 or whatever. And I think he's also going to mix in plenty of those big performances. And so I think he's probably going to end up around, like I said, like that 16 to 18 range. And I don't think Battle's going to be far behind him. I think he'll be in that 14 to 16 range and on a much more efficient than he's been in the past in his career. And I think both those guys, it probably will come down to the wire in terms of just who has the 40-point game, who has the whatever, but I wouldn't rule out either of them for sure.
Let's go. Let's do one more here. Kevin Mercer says it looks like Graham is finally bought in on the defensive end of the ball from us. You add that with his offensive game, he will play a lot of big minutes this season. I think we both agree that that's probably the key for Graham. Yes, I thought he played better defensively in this game against Alcorn State. I was kind of impressed with, this back spasms suck, man. And he hasn't been able to do a lot in terms of conditioning and everything like that for 2 or 3 weeks now. And to come back like he did, I thought he was in pretty good shape, but I was really impressed with the way he was sprinting up and down the floor, because we didn't always see that from Jalen Graham last year. In fact, I distinctly remember a time where he got beat down for a layup and I thought Muss was going to rip his head off. He was sprinting the floor every possession. I thought he looked a lot more comfortable on the defensive end. Like, he's playing more physical and aggressive, getting on the glass and everything. But he looked a lot more comfortable in the system. And I think the reason you can tell that is because he's on that back end under the rim, and he's kind of the mouthpiece for the entire defense. He's pointing guys in directions they need to go. He's calling out screens. He's loud. He's communicating. Those are things that we never saw from Jalen Graham last year. So I think that tells you, in terms of the buy-in, the attention to detail, some of those things that were lacking that held him back last year, he's really been working on that. I think it's a positive development. The free throws, maybe not so much, but I am impressed with, for a first showing from Graham after missing that much time. I thought he looked really good.
100%. And I feel like I wouldn't have held it against him if he didn't look that sharp, defensively, especially your first game back after back spasm. I wouldn't have been, too upset if he just maybe was kind of floating on defense a little bit, but I agree. Definitely look good. Here's the biggest sign with Jalen Graham is Eric Musselman is speaking good things about him, which, Curtis, didn't really happen a ton last year. And look, I'm not saying Eric Musselman didn't like Jalen Graham or whatever, but it felt like every time we asked Muss about Graham, his mind immediately went to, yeah, but he's got to improve on defense. You know what I mean? It felt like we got that answer a lot. And so I think it says a lot about what Jalen has been doing behind closed doors, that when we ask Muss about him, you see him kind of light up a little bit. He's like, hey, he's been killing it in practice. He's really been bringing that. We're not hearing those same things of like, he kind of needs to improve here. It's just a completely different tone. And, obviously coaches, there's a lot of coach speak here or there. I'm not saying every time a coach is asked a player about him, you're getting an honest evaluation, but I think it says a lot that you can tell when Muss is asked about him, he has a different feeling and reaction about him. And I think that's just from being in the program for a year, being bought in. And I'm tentatively buying what I'm seeing from Jalen Graham, especially because pre-injury, he was looking, it appears he was looking pretty good too. So it's like, I think he might have taken some strides there for sure.
Andrew, I think we covered it all, man. What do you think? First rodeo, did you have a good time?
Yeah, I had a good time. Yeah. I mean, if everyone knew the trials and tribulations we had to endure to get here, they'd probably have a little bit more of appreciation. But no, I really appreciate it. Hey, I appreciate the comment section. I mean, they're still coming in. We really appreciate the activity, and we want this to be like that. Obviously 100%. It's been a staple of this show for years, but even if it's just making fun of my hair, we that's what we want to do here. So I appreciate y'all tuning in, man.
Yeah, no, this has been awesome. It's been a lot of fun. I agree with the comments, the chat. Like we do want that. We want it to be as interactive as possible. So much so that as we move forward, we'll talk a little bit less and shut up. That way we can get to your comments and questions a little bit sooner, because it's awesome. But hey, we're excited about the basketball team. We know that you guys are too. This has been great. Our plan is going to be to do a studio show like this at the midweek, throughout the course of the season. Sometimes it'll be on Tuesday. Sometimes it'll be on Wednesday. I would recommend, clicking that notification bell, because it's going to depend on what the schedule looks like. But we're excited about it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And again, thanks as always for tuning in. This has been Curtis Wilkerson, Andrew Ellis with HawgSports.com. Hog Hoops Live. It's rolling again, season 4. We appreciate you, and we will catch you next time.